The elegant corridors of the Zarian transport vessel curved organically around Dr. Coranzera as he gathered his medical kit. He ran his fingers over the smooth, pearl-white walls, stark contrast to the utilitarian military shuttle awaiting him in the docking bay. Floating displays projected the vessel's vitals: optimal temperature, perfect humidity, completely sterile atmosphere. The kind of environment a surgeon of his caliber expected. The kind he would soon leave behind. "Final preparations, Dr. Zera?" the ship's AI inquired, its voice melodic and soothing. Zera nodded, triple-checking his personal medical array: the neural tissue regenerator, molecular suture apparatus, and nanite injectors were all secured in their foam-lined cases. These precision instruments represented the pinnacle of Zarian surgical technology, tools he had mastered over decades of practice in the most prestigious regenerative clinics on his homeworld. He closed the case with a soft click. "Send word to the others. We depart in 20 minutes." In the central medical bay, 3 other alien physicians waited. They had all volunteered for the Galactic Council's Medical Aid Program, a diplomatic initiative to assist Terran forces battling the Vetrax invaders on Arawar. Each came from a different world, bringing specialized skills that would complement a sophisticated surgical unit. Dr. Throx, a Gamoran traumatologist, towered over the others. His moss-green skin rippled with concern as he carefully packed trauma splints and bone-setting devices designed for his crane-like strength. Though physically imposing, nearly 7 feet tall with arms that could bend metal, Throx possessed the steady hands of a master surgeon. "The Terrans claim the battle for Aragar City ended this morning," Throx rumbled, his voice like stones shifting underground. "Our timing is fortunate. We'll be operating in a proper forward surgical center rather than a combat zone." Beside him, Dr. Liz Prilix adjusted the moisture sacs around her throat. The amphibious Amfrost medic specialized in field treatment under extreme conditions, though her idea of extreme meant tropical downpours on her aquatic homeworld, not battlefields littered with plasma burns and chemical weapons. "I've prepared my rainforest protocols," Prilix said, her words bubbling slightly through the fluid in her voice sacs. "Decontamination gels, waterproof surgical fields, rapid seal membranes. My techniques should adapt well to Terran physiology." The final member of their team, Dr. Ferial Kathe, meticulously calibrated a microgravitational stabilizer. As an aviary vascular specialist, her avian heritage was evident in the metallic blue and gold plumage that framed her sharp features. Her people's hollow bones made them especially sensitive to gravitational changes. "Arawar's gravity exceeds my comfort threshold by 0.2 standard," she chirped, adjusting the device on her wrist. "I'll need absolute stability for microvascular procedures. The Terrans assured me their surgical stations will accommodate." Zera nodded to each colleague, feeling a flutter of pride. The Galactic Council had assembled an elite team of physicians whose skills would impress even the most advanced human medical units. This mission would demonstrate the superiority of Council medical protocols while fulfilling their humanitarian obligation. "Remember," Zera addressed them, "we are ambassadors as much as physicians. The humans have their own medical traditions. We must respect them, even as we offer our superior techniques." A soft chime interrupted them. The ship's AI projected the image of a human male in a formal diplomatic uniform waiting at the docking port. "Ambassador Daniel Wilson has arrived to escort you to the Terran medical facility," the AI announced. The 4 alien physicians gathered their essential kits and proceeded to the airlock. As the door slid open, they were met by a human male with steel-gray hair and weathered features that spoke of years in diplomatic service. Ambassador Wilson's uniform bore the insignia of the Terran Alliance, pressed and proper, despite evident fatigue in his eyes. "Doctors," Wilson nodded respectfully. "Thank you for volunteering. Your assistance is greatly appreciated. If you'll follow me to the transport, we can begin the briefing en route." The contrast between the Zarian vessel and the human military pod was immediate and jarring. Where the alien ship featured flowing lines and ambient lighting, the Terran craft was a brutal cylinder of ablative armor, utilitarian metal benches, and harsh LED emergency lighting that cast everything in a bloody glow. "Please secure yourselves," Wilson instructed as they boarded. "The harnesses are designed for human physiology, but they should accommodate your forms adequately." The alien physicians settled uncomfortably into the 5-point restraints. Zara noted with growing concern that they carried only basic first aid kits, no regenerative equipment, no surgical arrays, not even portable sterilization fields. This suggested they would transfer to a proper medical transport once planetside. The pod door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, and Ambassador Wilson activated a holographic display showing Arawar's surface. "The situation has evolved," Wilson explained, his tone carefully measured. "The Vatrax assault on Aragar City ended approximately 6 hours ago. Coalition forces have established a medical triage center near the forward line. You'll be assisting there, rather than at the main military hospital." Prillix's throat sac pulsed rapidly, a sign of anxiety in her species. "What sort of facility are we discussing, Ambassador?" Wilson's expression remained professionally neutral. "A field hospital, Dr. Prillix. The wounded are being treated in a medical tent erected this morning." "A tent?" Kathy's feathers bristled. "Ambassador, vascular procedures require absolute sterility and stable surfaces." "I understand your concern," Wilson nodded. "But field medicine operates under different parameters than what you may be accustomed to." Before further discussion could occur, the pod's engines ignited. The alien physicians were pressed into their seats as acceleration forces mounted rapidly. 3 Gs far, more than comfortable for any of their species. Zara felt his internal organs shift uncomfortably, and his mind automatically calculated the potential for tissue damage under sustained G-forces. Through gritted teeth, Wilson continued the briefing. "Field medicine prioritizes stabilization over perfection. The goal is to keep soldiers alive until they can be evacuated to proper facilities." "What exactly does this entail?" Throx managed to ask despite the crushing pressure. Wilson's gaze was steady. "Triage protocols, chemical adhesives instead of sutures, manual amputations when necessary, broad-spectrum antimicrobials, rather than targeted therapies." Each description landed like a physical blow. Zara exchanged alarmed glances with his colleagues. These were procedures from medical history techniques relegated to museums on their worlds. His mind reeled at the prospect of treating patients with what amounted to primitive tools. "Surely you have regenerative technologies," Zara insisted. "Neural resequencers, at minimum?" The pod entered Arawar's atmosphere, and violent turbulence cut off Wilson's response. The craft bucked and shuddered, metal groaning as ablative shielding vaporized. Through small viewports, Zara glimpsed flames licking the hulla, terrifying sight for someone accustomed to the gentle descent profiles of medical transports. It felt like an eternity before the pod's retro thrusters fired, slowing their descent. With a bone-jarring impact, they touched down. The restraints retracted automatically, leaving the alien physicians disoriented and shaken. "We've arrived," Wilson announced, rising from his seat with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to violent landings. "Follow me, and stay close. The area is secure, but this is still an active war zone." The pod's door opened with a hydraulic groan, admitting the acrid smell of smoke, chemicals, and most distressingly, the unmistakable copper-sweet scent of blood. Arawar's 1.2 G gravity immediately pressed down on them, making each movement more laborious than expected. They emerged onto a desolate landscape. What had once been the outskirts of Aragar City was now a muddy field of dismembered warp tracks, scorched earth, and the rotting husks of Vatrax war machines. The sky hung low and gray, threatening rain, while the distant skyline showed the broken teeth of damaged buildings. Ahead, An enormous, olive-drab tent dominated the clearing. It stretched nearly 40 meters in length, its canvas walls scarred by shrapnel and partially patched with emergency sealant. Red crosses marked its sides, a medical symbol recognized across galactic cultures. Though the fabric's pristine white had long since turned to a dingy, smoke-stained gray. Outside the tent, soldiers moved with purposeful efficiency. Some carried stretchers bearing wounded. Others patrolled the perimeter with weapons ready. Medical personnel in blood-stained uniforms darted between groups of injured who lay on simple sleeping bags or sat propped against supply crates. "This," Kathy whispered, her voice faltering, "this is not a hospital." "This is a field hospital, Dr. Katha," Wilson corrected gently. "The distinction is important. Follow me." As they approached, Zara noticed color-coded tags attached to the wounded: red, yellow, green. Some form of categorization system, though no clear organizational pattern was evident. Patients seemed clustered roughly by injury severity, but with no sterile perimeter or isolation protocols. A human medic rushed past carrying a box of supplies. His uniform was caked with mud and dark stains that could only be blood. Zara caught a glimpse of the box's contents: rolls of gauze, bottles of clear liquid, and what appeared to be industrial adhesive tubes. "Ambassador!" Zara's voice tightened with growing alarm. "Where are the medical drones? The diagnostic arrays? I see no evidence of proper equipment." Wilson paused at the tent's entrance. "Dr. Zara, I need you and your colleagues to understand something fundamental. What you're about to see will likely shock you. Human battlefield medicine operates on principles of necessity rather than ideal conditions. Our priority is saving as many lives as possible with the resources available." Before any of them could respond, Wilson pulled back the tent flap and gestured them inside. The assault on their senses was immediate and overwhelming. The metallic smell of blood dominated everything, undercut by the acrid tang of cauterized flesh, antiseptic chemicals, and the sickly sweet odor of infection. The air hung heavy with moisture, human sweat, and fear. Rows of wounded soldiers lay on everything from proper stretchers to salvage doors repurposed as operating tables. Medics moved frantically between patients, their hands and forearms stained crimson. The floor was packed dirt covered in places with hastily laid tarps, already slick with fluids. Near the entrance, a human surgeon bent over a Marine whose leg was mangled beyond recognition. The doctor held what appeared to be a manual sawan, actual toothed blade, attached to a handle. With methodical strokes, he cut through bone and tissue while assistants held the soldier down. The patient was conscious, biting down on a leather strap, his screams muffled but still audible. A few meters away, another medic applied what looked like industrial adhesive directly into a gaping wound on a soldier's torso, pinching the flesh together and holding it until the compound set. No sterilization field, no precision sutures, just chemical glue sealing traumatized tissue. In another corner, a wounded Wolverine one of the Terran Alliance's allied species gritted fanged teeth as a medic extracted shrapnel from his shoulder using what appeared to be ordinary metal forceps. Each piece of metal made a wet plink as it was dropped into a metal pan. Beside Zara, Dr. Prilix began to hyperventilate, her throat sac inflating and deflating rapidly. Her amphibian eyes widened in horror, darting from one bloody scene to another. She stumbled, tried to speak, then collapsed to the ground in a boneless heap. Dr. Throx lasted only moments longer. The massive Gamoran watched in rigid shock as a human doctor pressed a heated metal plate directly against an open wound to cauterize bleeding vessels. The sizzle of cooking flesh and the acrid smoke that rose proved too much. Throx's eyes rolled back, and he toppled like an uprooted tree, narrowly missing a passing nurse. Dr. Kathy stood frozen, her feathers completely flat against her body in extreme distress. Her beak opened and closed silently, her avian respiratory system struggling under the combined stress of increased gravity and psychological shock. With a soft chirp of distress, she too lost consciousness, her beak cracking sharply against the mud as she fell. Only Zara remained standing, though he swayed dangerously. His inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a stress response his species had evolved to filter overwhelming visual stimuli. His medical training battled against primal revulsion, barely keeping him upright as wave after wave of horror washed over him. A human doctor approached, wiping bloody hands on an already stained apron. His face was gaunt with exhaustion, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep and irritation from smoke. He took in the scene, 3 unconscious alien physicians and one barely standing with a mix of disappointment and irritation. "Ambassador Wilson," the human doctor snapped. "If they can't handle blood, they're useless here. Get them out of my medical bay." Wilson stepped forward. "Dr. Morrison, these are highly skilled physicians from the Galactic Council. They simply need time to adjust." "Time?" Morrison barked a laugh that held no humor. "Look around you. Ambassador, we have 200 wounded and a dozen surgeons. We don't have time for cultural sensitivity training." Zara's mind raced, caught between the impulse to flee with his colleagues and the oath he had sworn as a physician. Every instinct screamed that this place violated everything he knew about proper medicine. The procedures he witnessed would be considered barbaric, even criminal, on his homeworld. He opened his mouth to respond, to defend his team's reaction, when his gaze fell on a human teenager lying nearby. The young soldier couldn't have been more than 18 years old. Half his face was burned, uniform torn and bloodied, but his eyes, they were clear and alert, watching Zara with something that looked remarkably like hope. In that moment, something shifted in Zara's understanding. This boy didn't care about sterile fields or molecular sutures. He needed anyone to stop his pain and save his life. The realization struck Zara with physical force. Imperfect medicine was infinitely better than no medicine at all. With trembling hands, Zara knelt beside his fallen colleagues. "Ambassador Wilson, please help me revive my team." Wilson moved quickly, producing emergency stimulant packs from his pocket. Together, they applied the smelling salts to each physician. Prilix was the first to stir, coughing and disoriented. Throx followed, his massive form tensing as consciousness returned. Kathy came last, her feathers ruffling in distress as she regained awareness. Zara addressed them with newfound resolve. "Listen to me. If you call yourselves doctors, you will get up. Now, these soldiers need us, regardless of the conditions." "But the procedures," Prilix bubbled weakly. "They're barbaric." "They're saving lives," Zara countered. "Which is more barbaric, using primitive tools to save a life, or refusing to help because the conditions aren't perfect?" Dr. Morrison watched this exchange with skeptical interest. Ambassador Wilson stood nearby, his expression carefully neutral, but his posture tense with hope. Slowly, each alien physician rose to their feet. They swayed unsteadily in the unfamiliar gravity, still processing the sights and smells around them. But they stood. "Dr. Morrison," Zara said, turning to the human surgeon, "we request instruction in your field methods. We are qualified physicians, but these techniques are unfamiliar to us." Morrison studied them for a long moment, measuring their resolve against his desperate need for skilled hands. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Barnes!" he called, and a human nurse approached. Unlike Morrison's aggressive intensity, Nurse Barnes moved with a quiet competence, her blood-stained uniform belying a gentle demeanor. "Show them the basics," Morrison instructed. "Chemical adhesives, field antibiotics, triage protocols. If they can handle that, maybe they can assist with procedures." He turned to Zara. "Don't touch my patients until Barnes clears you. We can't afford mistakes." Nurse Barnes led them to a supply table. With patient efficiency, she demonstrated the use of chemical adhesive to close wounds, a technique that made Kathy's feathers bristle with professional indignation. The binding agent creates a flexible seal, Barnes explained, applying the substance to a demonstration pad. It's not pretty, but it keeps pathogens out and blood in the field. That's what matters. She showed them how to apply broad-spectrum antibiotics gel packs designed to fight multiple infection types simultaneously, rather than targeting specific pathogens. Out here, sterility is a luxury, Barnes explained, noting their discomfort. We compensate with aggressive prophylaxis. Better to overtreat than lose a soldier to sepsis. Next came triage tags, the color-coded system they had noticed outside. Red is immediate, life-threatening conditions. Yellow is urgent but stable. Green is walking wounded. Barnes handed each alien physician a stack of tags. Your first job is to correctly categorize incoming casualties. This determines who gets treatment first. The alien physicians listened intently, struggling to reconcile these primitive methods with their advanced training. Zara glued his fingers together during practice. Prilix applied too much adhesive to a demonstration wound. Throx's giant hands fumbled with the tiny clasps on the triage tags. Kathy trembled as she practiced clamping a simulated bleeding vessel. Her technique precise, but her courage wavering. Throughout their awkward practice, wounded continued to arrive. The sounds of battle had resumed in the distance, dull thuds and the occasional shriek of energy weapons. The war hadn't paused for their cultural adjustment. "Time's up," Barnes announced after barely 30 minutes of instruction. "We need hands. Each of you shadow a human medic. Watch, then help when you're ready." The tent became a whirlwind of activity as the alien physicians were thrust into the chaotic reality of field medicine. Zara found himself beside a human doctor, treating a soldier with a lacerated femoral artery. The wound pumped bright arterial blood with each heartbeat. "Pressure here," the doctor ordered, guiding Zara's hands to the wound. "Don't let up." Zara pressed down, feeling warm blood seep between his fingers despite his best efforts. On his homeworld, he would have simply activated a vascular sealing field and applied targeted stem cell spray. Here, his hands were the only tool available. "Now, clamp," the doctor instructed, passing Zara a metal instrument that looked like primitive pliers. "Just distal to your finger. There. Feel the pulse? That's where you clamp." Zara's hands trembled, but he followed the instructions. The clamp snapped shut, and the pulsing blood slowed to a trickle. "Good," the doctor nodded. "Now hold that while I tie it off." Across the tent, Dr. Prilix worked alongside a medic treating an Amfrost soldier wound of her own species. The wounded amphibian suffered from plasma burns across his moisture sacs, a potentially fatal injury. Tears streamed down Prilix's face as she helped apply cooling gel and crude pressure wraps to the damaged tissue. "Will he survive?" she asked the human medic, her voice quavering. 50-50, came the honest reply. "But without treatment, 0. That's field medicine. We improve the odds, even when we can't guarantee outcomes." Dr. Throx's size and strength proved unexpectedly valuable. The Gamoran assisted with setting broken bones, using his powerful hands to realign shattered limbs before human medics applied splints and stabilizers. Though he winced at the crude techniques, he couldn't deny their effectiveness. Dr. Cathay perhaps faced the greatest challenge. Her microvascular specialty seemed impossible to practice in such conditions, until Dr. Morrison himself called her to assist with a delicate procedure on a Wolverine soldier's ocular blood vessels. "Your hands are smaller than mine," Morrison explained, handing her microforceps that seemed primitive to her, but were the most delicate tools available. "Can you clamp that bleeder? The one at the edge of the orbital socket?" Kathy steadied herself, activated her personal gravity stabilizer, and bent to the task. Though the tools were crude by her standards, the procedure itself, isolating a bleeding vessel, was familiar. She worked with growing confidence, surprising both herself and Morrison with her adaptability. The hours blurred together as the alien physicians immersed themselves in human field medicine. They made mistakes. Zara applied too much pressure to a burn wound. Prilix forgot the triage protocols and mistagged a patient. Throx accidentally broke a splint with his strength. Kathy struggled with the heavier instruments. Yet, for each failure, they experienced success. Wounds were closed, bleeding stopped, infections prevented, pain managed. The methods were primitive, but the results were undeniable. Soldiers who would have died received treatment that would keep them alive until evacuation. The rhythm of emergency medicine had just begun to feel manageable when chaos erupted anew. A violent explosion rocked the area, close enough to make the tent poles sway dangerously. Shouts of alarm rose from outside. "Incoming!" someone yelled. "Stray Vatrax drone!" Another explosion, closer this time. Wounded soldiers cried out in fear. Medical personnel dove for cover, many shielding their patients with their own bodies. Zara found himself near the teenager he'd noticed earlier, the boy whose hopeful gaze had steeled his resolve. As debris began to fall from the tent ceiling, Zara didn't think. He acted. He threw himself over the young soldier, covering the boy's already injured body with his own. The moment passed in a haze of noise and dust. When Zara raised his head, the immediate danger had passed, though alarms still blared outside. The boy beneath him looked up with the same hope-filled eyes. "Thanks, Doc," he whispered through cracked lips. Something tightened in Zara's chest pride. Perhaps. Or simply the recognition that he had become what this moment needed. Not a specialized surgeon with advanced tools, but simply a doctor protecting his patient. The attack subsided as quickly as it had begun, a stray drone, neutralized by perimeter defenses. But its brief incursion had added new casualties to the already strained medical system. Wounded soldiers flooded in, many with blast injuries and shrapnel wounds. Dr. Morrison moved through the chaos like a conductor, directing an orchestra of suffering. "Triage by the entrance. Operating stations 1 through 4 for red tags. Yellow tags to stabilization. Green tags to self-treatment area." The alien physicians found themselves fully integrated into the medical response. No longer observers or reluctant participants. They had become essential components of the hospital's functioning. Zara found himself performing procedures he would have considered unconscionable mere hours before clamping bleeding vessels with crude metal tools, sealing wounds with chemical adhesives, debriding burned tissue with a simple scalpel. His elegant surgical training adapted to these primitive conditions through sheer necessity. Prilix mastered the chemical field kits with surprising speed. Her amphibian heritage, evolved to handle toxic environments, gave her a natural advantage in measuring and mixing the crude antimicrobials. Soon, she was preparing treatment packs faster than the human nurses. Her earlier panic replaced by grim determination. Throx's powerful physique proved invaluable during emergency amputations. Where humans required saws and significant effort, the Gamoran could apply precisely controlled pressure to cleanly break bones, reducing trauma and blood loss. Though the procedures sickened him, he recognized their life-saving necessity. Kathy adapted her microsurgical techniques to work without proper equipment. Using nothing but enhanced vision and steady hands, she located and tied off bleeding vessels that human surgeons struggled to identify in the chaotic conditions. Her precision, even with crude tools, saved numerous patients from bleeding out. Throughout the long night, the 4 alien physicians worked alongside their human counterparts. The tent became a universe unto itself, time measured in patients treated. Success tallied in lives preserved. Failure marked by the quiet covering of faces when medicine's limits were reached. As dawn broke over Arawar, the first evacuation ships arrived. Stabilized patients were carefully loaded for transport to orbiting medical facilities, the advanced hospitals the alien physicians had expected to work in from the beginning. The most critical cases went first, accompanied by exhausted human medics. The tent, so chaotic through the night, gradually settled into a weary order. The line of incoming wounded slowed to a trickle as the battle moved further from their position. Red-tagged patients had been stabilized or lost. Yellow tags had been upgraded to evacuation status. Green tags largely treated themselves with minimal supervision. Dr. Morrison approached the alien physicians as they gathered their scattered equipment. His face was shadowed with X-ray-like exhaustion, but his eyes held something new, genuine respect. "You proved me wrong," he admitted bluntly. "I thought you were tourists, not doctors. But you saved lives today. Real lives that would have been lost without your help." Zara inclined his head slightly. "We applied medicine under available conditions, as you have been doing all along." Morrison's laugh held actual warmth this time. "That's the first lesson of field medicine, Dr. Zara. Perfect is the enemy of good enough, and good enough keeps soldiers alive." "Our training was incomplete," Throx rumbled. His massive frame slumped with fatigue. "We learned much today." "As did we," Morrison acknowledged. Dr. Cathay's vascular techniques saved at least 3 patients we would have lost. Dr. Prilix's knowledge of amphibian physiology was invaluable with our non-human allies. Ambassador Wilson appeared at the tent entrance, his uniform somehow still presentable despite the chaos. "Doctors, your evacuation transport has arrived. The Council has requested your immediate return for debriefing." The 4 alien physicians exchanged glances. Each saw in the others the same realization. They had been transformed by this experience in ways none could have anticipated. "Ambassador," Zara spoke for the group, "please inform the Council that we request permission to remain on Arawar for the duration of this campaign. Our skills are needed here." Wilson's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Are you certain? The conditions are precisely where we can do the most good," Zara finished. "We have equipment and techniques that can improve field outcomes, and much still to learn about human resilience." Dr. Morrison extended his Honda, human gesture of partnership the alien physicians had studied, but never truly understood until this moment. "We would welcome your continued assistance, doctors." One by one, they accepted the handshake, Zara's 3-fingered grip, Throx's massive green palm, Prilix's webbed appendage, Cathy's delicate talon-like finger seach, connecting across species barriers through the universal bond of medical service. As the morning light strengthened, the 4 alien physicians stepped outside the tent. The battlefield stretched before them, still scarred, still dangerous, but somehow less alien than it had appeared upon their arrival. They had come as superior beings offering advanced aid. They would stay as colleagues who had discovered that medicine transcended technology. Dr. Corin Zara looked back at the crude field hospital, its blood-stained tarps and primitive equipment so different from the elegant facilities of his homeworld. Then he gazed at his hands, clean now after scrubbing, but forever changed by what they had done and what they had learned. "Proper medicine," he said softly to his colleagues, "isn't about perfect tools or ideal conditions. It's about preserving life under any circumstances." The others nodded in silent agreement as they turned back toward the tent and the wounded who awaited them. They were no longer just alien physicians. They were field doctors now, carrying both the burden and the honor that title bestowed. And somewhere in the universe, medical textbooks would need revision, not just with new techniques, but with a fundamental truth these 4 had discovered in mud and blood, that compassion required pragmatism to save lives on the edge of death. They walked back into the tent, voices steady, purpose renewed, ready to face whatever the next wave of casualties would bring. Behind them, the morning sun rose over Arawar's battlefield, casting long shadows but promising light.